My name's Rachel Horn, I'm an artist and I'm also a minor strike baby. I run a project called Pin the Pits, which is about marking regenerated coal mining sites on ordnance survey maps as a way of showing how mining shaped terrain and township, and so that younger generations of the community like me will have a sort of a reference point to what their community was about. I didn't really have any understanding of my mining background, none at all really. I knew that I was a minor strike baby and that meant something, but I had no idea about the culture at all. I wanted to move away as soon as I could at 16 because I felt this great sense of apathy around me. There's nothing to do there. What once was a prosperous town that had a vibrant sense of community and cultural identity, for my generation, there was just nothing there for us. So, many of us tried to get away. Some went to join the army, others escaped through drugs, drinking, getting a child. I was fortunate that I had older sisters that had studied and went on to further education, which is unusual, and I sort of followed their footsteps. And as soon as I could, I wanted to move to London and study art.
What was the appealing thing about London as a young person?
What was the thing about London? I think generally people are creative and want stimulation, gravitate towards cities, and I'd visited a couple of times and I just felt that's where I wanted to be. That was the place to be an artist. So.
And so you get to London and you do your art and you meet the people, and what happens then? I mean, what is the reflection process?
My work at that time was about trying to understand the apathy. It was all about kind of piecing together the world around me, I guess, broken Britain. And when I was at Art College in Doncaster, and I was trying to pull together anything that really resonated with me about how I felt and what this apathy was about. And this image in particular was from it was a photograph of a young man from Soviet Russia, and he had a tattoo on his forehead that said, "We are the flowers in your dustbin." And I didn't really understand what it meant, but it really resonated with me. I just felt that really articulated what I felt about the place that I was from and my generation. I talked a lot in the speech about this issue about growing up, knowing you're a strike baby, but in a very different world than that of your parents. We grew up amongst slag heaps and wastelands, and the area that I'm from is the Derwent Valley, but we used to call it the Death Valley. We didn't exactly understand what it was that had died there, but for us it was apathy. There was nothing there, and I think for our generation it's kind of about consumerism and escaping, and that is so different from the previous generation that was about sort of community and looking after one another and everybody being more or less the same. And I guess I am a Thatcher's baby to a certain extent. I moved to London, pursued a very hedonistic lifestyle, my own individualistic path, doing art at the horror of my parents who just thought, how is she going to get a job from doing art? But at the same time, what I realised was my practice was about understanding sort of this broken apathy that I saw around me, but also trying to understand what that community spirit was about and what that thing was that I was born into. And I talked in the speech about being a baby, being in the pram marching behind the banners, and the miners who were going back to work defeated in '84, and my mum crying, and she was crying for the loss of the community. She was crying for the miners' defeat. She was crying for the future of her family. She had 4 daughters, a husband at 40 with no job and no job prospect. You kind of feel like there's a glass ceiling over your head, and it's almost like you think The only way I can describe it is I can remember being like 12 or 13 and being in the local library and seeing competitions for being a young poet or being a young writer or something like that, and you just automatically think things like that don't happen to people like us. They just don't, and it's something that's still trying to like transcend now. It's like a sense of like worthlessness, a sense of like not really being, I don't know, just not really being good. And it's hard to describe, but I know that I'm not the only person that feels like this, and I know that other people from my background feel like it as well.
Do you feel that can be a driving force as well, in the sense that sometimes like you feel like you have a chip on your shoulder and you should be like actually, you should be dealing with it, but sometimes maybe you feel that actually you don't want to deal with it, you want to keep that chip on your shoulder because it's also what drives you.
Yeah, I guess that is true, because no matter what I've done in my life, I'm always like fighting for the next thing to sort of, I guess, feel that in some way that I am good and that I am worth something. Because I had you grow up with like a massive inferiority complex. Everything. I mean, we went to the worst school in the area. When we all got into college, and I was talking about this today, this morning, when a friend who came from the same village as me, it was like all the kids at the college that you felt that we were like the rough kids, like we were the bad kids. It was when I was in the second year at uni that I felt this like urgency to create a memorial to the history, and at that time it was the 20th anniversary of the miners' strike, and whilst in London I realised what a big deal it was, and that it wasn't just something that was isolated and about the area that I was from, that it was actually a national thing, and that this happened in not only Yorkshire but South Wales and Kent, and over 100,000 families suffered during that time. And because of that I decided that I wanted to create this memorial, and so I moved back to Yorkshire and spent a year kind of developing this concept to create a memorial. I organised a one-day event, which a project was funded by the Arts Council. It's called the Art of Dartmouth Light Project. It was about reconnecting the community to the terrain and the landscape that was there. So I placed 410 lights on the old pit tip, which has now been completely regenerated as kind of viewing point onto the rest of the community. And I had 410 lights, and each one represented the life of a miner that had died whilst working at KB Pit, and that included like boys and women from the end of the 18th century to sort of like closed in 1986. It was again about kind of getting the younger generation to have some attachment to what was there, and to realise that huge sort of mound and hill was built off the backs of the miners that lived and died and worked there. I organised a riverboat and an exhibition, and brought together other artists like myself that deal with the subject matter. So we had like a sound installation on the boat, we had projection, we had film projection, we had painters that do like abstract scenes of the same sort of terrain that as a visitor would visit there and would think it was completely rural and have no understanding of the history that's on that site, which again sort of brings me to Pin the Pits, which for me was a more permanent memorial, because it's actually marking these sites and saying that they are heritage sites and cultural of cultural interest for anybody who visits there. A lot of people ask me why why are you so interested in this history, why are you so interested in mining? It was 25 years ago that the strike ended. It's like people want to look to the future. But I know from growing up and not having any attachment to my background, if you don't understand your own past, how do you know how you want to shape your own future? And for me, all this has been about, it's like one body of work in my life that has allowed me to transcend so much negative experiences from myself and also collectively, because everybody who takes part in my project experiences that sense of community that is so lacking now, and I just want people to feel empowered by that. And that's why I get so frustrated when I go to the conferences like I did last weekend, where it's all the guys, all the kind of militant trade unionists, we're all there fighting the fight, and they look at us, the younger generation, that are all apathetic, and I get annoyed because I'm standing there as an artist, and they introduce me as Rachel Horn, artist on project. She's going to talk now about her artwork, and everybody's like, what the hell is she about? And don't really realise the integrity of what I do and how I am really, I'm keeping their movement alive. And I get frustrated that they don't see that there's other artists with the same integrity and the same vision, because the path's not been carved out for us, and we've had to find it in our own individualistic, Thatch baby kind of hedonistic way. And they don't realise that we are there. And I hate the fact that they have such a grand platform, with all the resources there to really be mentors and guides for the younger generation, and they're not. And I think after I spoke last week at the conference, I had to leave straight away because I didn't want to hear the praise that they were going to say after, because I felt so angry at the fact that it's taken me 6 years to even get on a platform where I could speak passionately about my generation, even though I've heard it all before about how we're apathetic and how, drugs, pregnancies, all the rest of it, all the negativity. I'm building like a festival. I've got a campaign that's kind of like a monster project now. It's like people from across all over want to be part of it and sort of support it and tell their stories through it. And I guess that's giving people a voice, which they don't feel they get through the political system. You can change public consciousness, I think, through the arts, and nobody trusts politics anymore, so you can't go in there with integrity and be taken seriously. You'd be shot down, but you can do it through the arts. You can have a political voice, and I've done that to a certain extent, and people say to me, why don't you go into politics? And I have no desire whatsoever. I had a brief moment where I was in Parliament speaking about the campaign, where I was working with politicians, and I just found it really disempowering actually, and I felt like the whole world, the whole system really didn't. I really didn't feel like I could say what I wanted to say through that, because there's so many people wanting to shoot you down. So I think, for me and my art as well, which is a real connective aesthetic to it, it's about raising consciousness and trying to inspire people to think differently, which I think the installation does. I think coal mining is a really creative but destructive force, and I think that's what I felt when I saw the installation. Obviously it resonates with me on a really personal level, because my grandfather's died of emphysema, my father's recently claimed for incapacity benefit for his lungs. I remember photographing a letter, this is about 3 years ago, that my dad received for his father, who died when my dad was in his 20s of pit diseases, and it was a couple £100 really for losing your dad in your 20s. So it really brought back a lot of those memories for me, but also how detached people are from the energy source now, and how when the community that I was from was prosperous, that miners owned the energy source, and that they were incredibly powerful because of that.